Hello everyone, my name is Charlie Wilson, and I'm here today to talk to you about one of my favorite producers and certainly one of the greatest producers of the alternative rock genre. Of course, I'm speaking of the very sensational, yet controversial, Steve Albini. On July 22nd, 1962, Steve Albini was born in Pasadena, California to both Frank and Gianna Albini. Though Steve Albini is held as one of the greatest alternative rock producers of all time and considered the godfather of grunge, Albini is not quite your typical rock producer on paper. Though he spawned controversy throughout his career as both producer and guitarist, Albini made great strides and contributions to the alternative rock as we know it, thus making him one of the most visible producers in the genre today. Back in the 80s, Albini was the fronting member of the cult band Big Black and saw their first debut album release, but then shortly after had split with the band. It was at this point where Albini began to grow his reputation for his very independent mind state and behavior of not wanting to deal with the record labels and their restrictions. After this split from Big Black, Albini later formed the band Rape Man in 1988, which soon after had failed and split up once trouble arose at the pressing plants with the workers regarding the band's controversial name. It was at this point of his life where Albini began working more in production with upcoming alternative bands, and where Albini's music career would really begin to evolve. In 1988, Albini produced the iconic band Pixies' most celebrated album, Surfer Rosa, which helped catapult Albini's experimental sound into the music world. This would also mark introduction of Albini's rather interesting work ethic. Versus being a producer trying to manipulate the band's record to the label's liking and attempting to get every producer point he could obtain, Albini played more of an engineer role, while focusing purely on the sound of the product, leaving the band to create organically without the meddling hands of the label influencing the sound. This also gave Albini more time to experiment and evolve his gritty sound he had brought from his days with Big Black, which included raging guitars, punchy mid-range, and raw percussion. With this technique, Albini gave the band a sound which resembled that of true live performance, focusing on natural sounds versus your typical studio manipulated production. Taken to his usual style of work ethic, Albini initially wrote a 4-page letter to Nirvana explaining how he had no patience for corporate meddlers and has always refused to take points for compensation in production. He also suggested to the band should record at the isolated Pachyderm Studios out about an hour south of Minneapolis. Of course, we all know the epic effect these particular actions and methods by Albini ultimately had on In Utero, which stands out today as one of Albini's and Nirvana's greatest works. Later on, Albini returned to the world of artistry by teaming up with Bob Weston of Volcano Sons and Todd Trainer of Rifle Sport and Bricklayer Cake to form the trio Shellac, which saw their success with their debut album At Action Park, which was released on Chicago's Touch and Go Records. Albini also continued his production career while working with bands such as well-known grunge act Bush and indie acts like the bands Storm and Stress, P.W. Long, Melt Banana, and many more. Though he had quite a controversial and jagged journey throughout his music career, Steve Albini has helped produce some of the greatest acts that the alternative rock world has ever seen and has made great accomplishments with implementing the grunge rock sound as we know it today. It goes without saying that Steve Albini is definitely a producer extraordinaire. Well, folks, that about wraps it up. Again, my name is Charlie Wilson, and I thank you for enjoying this presentation. Now, if you excuse me, it's time for me to get back to work.